From the largest multiplex to the smallest community cinema, the magic of the big screen has been part of our lives for over 100 years. Our desire to drift away with stories of romance, horror, science fiction or action is now the easiest it has ever been through the numerous different mediums available. But something continues to draw us back to the picture houses, both old and new. What is it about cinema that continues to take us out of our living rooms and into a world of our own?
Well, cinema's I can only say it's my life.
For me, film, or good film, is about feeling.
It means entertainment, as simple as that.
Cinema is more about people and an experience more than it is about film.
As a child, I used to borrow or steal money to go to pictures.
I started first going to see films in cinemas, I guess when I was growing up, and started to go to the Saturday Club at the local cinema.
And I seem to remember watching Beavis and Butthead Do America, The Fifth Element, Private Parts, and I think it might have been Stargate, all in one day. And that was like the best day ever.
I got into cinema in this cinema in 1979 as a 17-year-old. I worked here as a projectionist for 3 years and then left and went back into full-time education. And then I ended up at Penistone for a good number of years, 25 years plus, involved with Penistone. And then when this place closed, we decided to give it a go, take it on and reopen it. And so we now run this one and Richmond, and I'm involved in a touch of other cinemas as well. So pretty much my life is cinema.
I always responded to films, and as I got older, I got more and more interested in different types of films. Particularly unusual films, foreign language films. I think for me, because it was a way of looking at different cultures and different societies, and I suppose expanding my own worldview.
With cinema, you have the ability to go through that feeling in a kind of collective experience, and human beings are collective individuals. We like to gather together in groups.
It is purely entertainment, and that's the wonder of the cinema. You can be, taken away to a world where men can fly. I remember seeing the first Superman film many, many years ago, and the special effects, which were, with hindsight, pretty naff. You did come out and believe Christopher Reeve could actually fly, and I think that is the magic. That is the magic of cinema, without a doubt.
Those days, I got 5 local cinemas that I could go to, and the lady I loved most was Carmen Miranda. When I was about 7, I actually wrote to her in Hollywood and received a reply. This was during the war years. And I received a reply which I always said was written in her hand. And I loved that woman.
People will tell you, cinema is an escape. It's escapism. And I think, yes, it is, but that's film. Film is the escape. Coming to the cinema is kind of the means to escape.
So for me, seeing a good film that communicates a feeling, whether it's of joy or of optimism or of great sadness or whatever, in a room with other people, is really important, and it helps you to kind of contextualize, what you're seeing. There are some films that I think, that would count as being films that you probably want to watch on a small screen yourself and have a personal experience. But actually cinema is not for those films, it's for the big films. What better than to see a comedy with other people laughing in the same room? It carries you along, you get the mood of it and the feel of it.
Our early experience of the cinema establishes a lasting bond between us and our love of film. For some, the memories of having a cinema in every suburb linger, whilst others grew up with the birth and domination of the multiplexes. However, our connection is not just about our familiarity with film, but the events that surround our visits to the cinema, the social aspect, emotional experience, and the environment. Everyone has an early or favourite memory of cinema, and they are all unique, just like the venues we shared them in.
This building was opened in 1956. It replaced the Empire, which was opened, I believe, in 1908, which was a live theatre, converted to cinema sometime in the early, I think it was 1920, converted to cinema, still did a bit of live. That burnt down in 1954, just months after the full refurb, and it was owned by the Gaumont chain, and they decided to they had to demolish the site, and they rebuilt this building that's here now. Opened as a Gaumont in 1956.
The Penistone Paramount is 100 years old this year. It was opened in November 1914 as an assembly hall. Unfortunately, it actually opened 3 or 4 months after the outbreak of the Great War, with lots of troops going away, because at the time Penistone was an industrial town. It's a market town these days, and an awful lot of men were basically at work or away joining the army. So that the Assembly Hall became a bit of a white elephant in many ways. And Mr. Jannings from Manchester approached the town council who owned it and basically said, you know, the next big thing is cinema, and he offered to operate it as a cinema. And it opened as a cinema the following October, the 31st of October 1915. So we've got a double anniversary this year. The building is 100 years old, but it actually became an entertainment venue in October 15. So we've got more celebrations planned for then.
What I did start to do, and I suppose lots of people from my generation say the same, is they started to watch BBC Two World Cinema series. They were showing La Dolce Vita, the Fellini film, which I remember watching that and being completely fascinated by it, and particularly the opening scene. Which I don't know if you remember the film, but there's a statue of Christ dangling from a helicopter flying over the slums of Naples, which is a very powerful image. And I think that was the first time I'd seen any non-English language film, and that always stayed with me. I always remember that.
And I went to the Manor Cinema, and I was watching a film called Down Argentina Way, and it was her first film. I remember the compare, the nightclub that the scene was set in. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Carmen Miranda, and then she came shimmering onto the screen, and it was instant love. You know, she wore about 5 pounds of fruit on top of her head, and heels about this high, and she sang in a fractured English and Portuguese, and I absolutely loved her. And I think that's when I loved cinema.
The woman that used to look after us when we were kids was also an usherette at the cinema, so I've got quite early memories of being in cinemas in the Odeon in Didsbury, Withington, and that experience. She just used to take us and sit us down and tell us to be quiet, sort of thing, you know, and give us a bag of crisps in the back row. But that early experience of cinema was really kind of important.
Yeah, going to see E.T., probably the first film I would have seen, which would have been 82, E.T. So I would have been 3, or 2 or 3. And the main thing I remember, aside from the film itself, is just like an audience full of crying children, and just the noise of other kids crying, thinking, what are they crying about? This is awesome.
I was growing up near Bradford in West Yorkshire, so I started going to the film theatre in Bradford, which was showing all sorts of strange foreign films. I saw lots of Ingmar Bergman films and Buñuel and lots of Fellini's, all that type of thing, and started just seeing as many films as I could. And then I think when I was 16, I volunteered to be an usher at the cinema at the Bradford Film Theatre, and so I guess I got to see the films for free from that point on. So that was my sort of engagement with cinema. That's how I started, seeing lots of films and becoming interested in not only the films but the cinemas as well.
I remember going to the cinema with friends. It was so exciting when you went. No mum and dad. We're going to see this. I went to see Look Who's Talking 2. I hadn't even seen Look Who's Talking 1, but it was going to see a film with friends that was the big draw, rather than what we were actually going to see. And I think that's probably still true of kids today on a Saturday afternoon, when they all just come in. I want to see something. I want to see a 15. There you go. But that's still true today. That it's the experience that people are coming in for, rather than a lot of the times the film.
First memory of cinema would have to be laughing at my mum, who was crying during Bambi, and me and my brother thinking that was hilarious. That was probably at the Ipswich Regent, sometime kind of in the kind of mid-80s. That was probably my earliest memory.
I guess Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Krull, stuff like that, obviously not on the same scale. All those films, I remember being so kind of glued to the screen and my dad still tells the story like time and again of how I was entertained, like thought that the bit at the end of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom with the rope bridge, and when there's guys falling off the rope bridge and getting eaten by crocodiles, I thought that was hilarious, apparently. That explains a lot, given what I've gone on to do.
That was another thing, the music of the newsreels, the beginning and the end of the newsreels. And everything, I think it was the music, the colour, because don't forget I was brought up in war years, very drab, blacked out Britain. So the music and the colour of the cinema, yes, yeah.
Probably everybody, if they look inside them, they've got a film that's a point at which I went to see that, and that kind of, not changed my life, but changed part of how I read life, how part of how I define myself, you know.
As generations change, the unique audiences who attend cinema also change with the social, economic and technological revolutions. For cinemas to continue to flourish, they must know their audiences and accommodate their needs, desires and wishes at every opportunity. The hope for every film studio is to produce the big hit of the year that resonates with us all. Cinemas in turn must understand their audiences to fulfil that hope. The question is, how well do cinemas know their audiences?
I can remember when I opened the Real Park in South Street, the man from New Realm coming and he'd got the quad post for the film, Nefertiti, Queen of the Nile, and there, what about that? And he opened the quad poster in full, and there was this garish poster. I booked it on poster value alone.
I mean, I think we've been fairly consistent, I think, from when we've started. You know, because of our location, we do get a lot of students, a big student, and then sort of young adults. I guess with the increase in city centre living, we maybe saw a bit more people coming because we don't have our own car park. We're good for public transport and people who want to walk in. So that's kind of the audience that we have and pretty much have always had, I guess. And it has been fairly consistent, I think.
We're lucky that we're independent, so we program what we think will play. The vast majority of our customers tend to be over 30, and they tend to love biopics. They love British-made films. They love true life type films. They don't tend to come in numbers to the big blockbuster sci-fi type things. Marvel type films just struggle here, which is really strange because they take loads of money in multiplexes.
The phrase that comes to mind, which is a phrase that another manager colleague of mine coined when he first came here, and that was kids and grannies. And as you've just seen, we've just done the senior screen, which is very popular. This is the first week in weeks that we haven't completely sold out on a Wednesday morning. So the older people will come here, and the young families will come here. What we do struggle with is getting the young adults. The young adults will jump in the car and go off to local multiplexes. We know that, and there's not a lot we can do about that. Having said that, again, it depends on the film. 50 Shades of Grey saw absolutely every denomination you could imagine. We had the young ones, the old ones, both sexes. It was lots and lots of new people came here. So, but where we can score is on the price, because our prices of tickets, admissions and concessions when you get in here are much lower than multiplexes in the area. So we do score on price, but obviously we haven't got the choice. We've just got 2 screens. So we do tend to be, in this particular cinema here in Barnsley, we do tend to go for similar product to what multiplexes do.
When you hear about the likes of companies like cinema chains encouraging, we're going to have text-friendly screenings, it's don't encourage people to text in the cinema, and it's the same with live tweeting cinema events. It's don't do that. The entire place is going to be lit up with your screen and everyone's going to hate you. So don't do it.
People who come to this cinema go to multiplexes as well. So if people like films, like cinema, they go to all sorts of different cinemas, which I think is very healthy and very good. I suppose what our job is to try and get them to see something that's a bit different or something they wouldn't normally expect to see. quite often, you know, the films we show don't have a huge marketing budget behind them. And so, you know, at a local level, we have to work a little bit harder to persuade people to come and pay their money and sit and watch a film that they may not know very much about. So it's quite important that we select the films very carefully so that people have a good experience when they see them.
One of the best things about programming for the Five and Dime is really surprising people. Like, we show Harold and Maude on Valentine's Day, we did last year. That's one of my all-time favourite films, and you know, we screened it to a whole bunch of people who hadn't seen it before, and they came out afterwards and were just like, that is now my favourite movie, which is awesome.
The days of kind of just making it and think, well, the audience will turn up, are kind of gone. Certainly within the business model that we have, as my company rather than as the showroom, we try and get sales and distribution involved as early as possible. And those are the people that will say, you're making this film, this is your audience, so how do you make what you're making there close to that? Now, that doesn't always work.
Integrity is at the heart of what we're doing with programming, and you can, because you really kind of live or die by the strength and the quality of your programming. For cinema to survive, I think that's what it needs. It needs a sense. It needs a sense that somebody's cared about various aspects of it. So people have cared about the fact that the film that's being shown is the right kind of film, is a good film, or is a film that the audiences should see. It's this, and that filters down to everything from is the screen like adequate, is the screen clean, is the music that's playing pre-showed, is that right? You know, it's about building a sense of event and a sense of occasion, which is something I've always tried to do. If it's a film about heavy metal, have Anthrax playing before it, or if it's a David Lynch movie, have maybe some like Badalamenti, like scores or whatever. It's a bit of forethought, and it doesn't take much, but it all adds to the sense of occasion. It all adds to why people will hopefully come and see stuff.
At the Futurist at Elsica, I was showing 10 Rillington plays, and the distributors insisted that I showed it for Sunday for 7 days. Well, Elsica wasn't a Sunday for 7 days theatre, and for the first 2 or 3 days it was a complete flop. Takers were down, so I thought, it's the title. So on the canopy at the front I put in large letters the Christie Acid Bath Murders, and then in smaller letters underneath 10 Rillington plays. So of course the Acid Bath Murders took the eye and business improved. It just shows you what you can do when you just... I wasn't being dishonest, was I? No.
In years gone by, cinemas used to exist in first and second run formats. Large city centres or first run cinemas would show the latest film, attracting the bulk of an audience, whilst the second run cinemas, largely located in the suburbs, would pick the film up after it had run its course, offering cheaper prices to see films that had already been out for weeks. The synergy between these two formats meant that films could run a definite course and reach audiences no matter what their location, albeit at different times. Nothing like this relationship exists anymore. Instead, cinemas are largely in direct competition with one another, whilst attempting to cater for different audience demographics. For cinemas to thrive, they must understand this fact and work with, not against each other.
Quite often, film distribution companies complain that not enough cinemas show the films that they're distributing. They find it hard to get bookings, which I find quite surprising. And I think that's partly because there's lots of chains of cinemas in the UK, as you'd expect. Not that many independent cinemas, and it's obviously independent cinemas that quite often make adventurous programming choices, or will show a film that they believe in, even though they know it's not going to get the biggest audience in the world, rather than just choosing to show a film or not show a film because of how much money it's taking. So one of the things we do, because we select our films very carefully, if we believe in the film, quite often, you know, not all the time, but quite often we're able to extend its run a little bit.
I think what works really well for certain independent cinemas is the idea of that they've seen a film, and it's kind of the way I approach programming as well. It's like, I've seen this, I think it's brilliant, and I think you would like this as well. I think there is competition. I think there has to be competition because, but it's about putting on a good show. It always has been for me. So I think every cinema, whether it's an independent or a main multiplex chain, giving the audience something different or something that makes them choose that place, they have to do that surely, because otherwise it just becomes this kind of homogenized, kind of soulless experience where you might as well be on a conveyor belt going past seats. You know, right? Okay, we'll get on this end. We'll see the film is there. That's it. Right, and then on to the next thing. You know, it's never something I've been interested in doing.
There is a lot of crossover between the cinemas, which is good because, you know, there are people who, I know we've got guests who, when you suggest, if they come in looking for a film and you say, oh, we haven't got it at the showroom, we've got it. Where?
People don't like the flea pit cinemas, so they build these big shiny new multiplexes, and then they love them and they're great, and now they're tired of them, and now everyone's seeking a different kind of experience. So I think that everyone wants and can have that experience that they're after now. If you kind of want to go to the multiplex to see, I don't know, something like The Theory of Everything, you can. You can also go to the Curzon and see it and have a very different experience. You can also go to the showroom and see it and have a very different experience. And that's great, and that's three cinemas showing the same film that, you know, you can see three different ways.
Multiplex has been good for the business, to be quite honest. Without multiplexes, I don't think you'd see the cinema business as buoyant as it is now. There's no doubt about that. How that affects independence, actually, it probably feeds in. Multiplexes are going to play virtually there's generally around 10 films that come out every week. They're able to play all of it. There is always a group of people who are early adopters to films. They have to see it this weekend, and that is what the multiplex plays to. We take films on release occasionally, but generally we take them a little bit later. And what tends to happen is people that have missed them at multiplexes come to us. So we're almost a second level of playing in many ways. Sometimes you think, you know, it'd be nice not to have a multiplex 12 miles away in Meadowhall and 14 miles away in Wakefield. But then again, would people come here? Probably not.
As technology advances, the film industry advances too. For decades, the medium of celluloid was the only way to screen films in a cinema, but the advent of digital meant that films could be produced, distributed and screened far more easily. For some, this revolution meant cinemas could be more flexible with their content and became an absolute must. For others, the death of celluloid felt like a piece of cinema history had died. Nowadays, all but the purest of cinemas look to screen everything in digital format. But in taking out the old 35mm projectors, are we denying a part of cinema history that so desperately needs to be kept alive?
Technology, you know, as it advances, it's you know, it's a bittersweet thing, isn't it? So in production, it's now easier to make films. It's also a lot easier to make bad films. In terms of exhibition, I don't think technology has yet had its full effect. The days of going to a cinema and watching a print that bobs and weaves because it's an old print and the sprockets aren't quite as good or the projector's not been recently maintained or whatever have gone. You know, you go into a cinema now, digital projection, you get rock solid projection, and you come to expect that.
I know people love 35mm, but I think now that we're on digital, we're able to offer, you know, there are fewer breakdowns, there are fewer problems. We're able to be more fluid, and I think people are aware as well that with the 35mm, a lot of the projection team left as well. But it does mean that now, if something goes wrong, I'm not looking for a projectionist to fix it. It will be fixed pretty much straight away.
Of course, my background's 35mm. I've worked in 35mm since 1979. I was a cinema engineer for a good number of years. A lot of those years was installing, servicing, repairing 35mm kit across Europe. So, you know, I'm very fond of 35mm kit. I've got a pile of 35mm film, trailers, clippings, bits, even some feature films. So, you know, I'll never, while ever there's breath in my body, there'll be a 35mm projector somewhere around me.
We still have 35mm projectors in all 4 of our screens, but I know a lot of because we just haven't taken them out, we don't use them very often, so we have digital projectors as well. I know some of the newer cinemas that have opened recently, you know, the art cinemas maybe have one screen that's equipped to show 35mm, but most of them will be just digital.
The majority of, like, the multiplexes particularly, they don't have 35mm projection anymore, which poses a challenge, because I did some programming for Bradford International Film Festival as well as over here at Sheffield, and I remember it never occurred to me to ask, like, what formats can you do, and I just clicked, luckily just in time, when we were actually programming for the main films, not even for any various kind of ephemera that we might bring in extra. And they were like, oh no, there's no 35mm. And I was like, well, it's a good job we haven't got any for the main films that we've already booked.
We moved to digital 3 years ago. We had to remove the 35mm simply because there wasn't room. With an ordinary Vic 8, which is what we had, a Victoria 8, which is, you know, a fairly standard projector. It also had a big reel adapter on it, so basically you could put the entire film on in one go. That just takes up too much space. The projector up there is about 1 metre by 3/4 of a metre by 600mm deep, so it's a fairly big box, and there just isn't room. It's a relatively small projection room, so the 35mm had to go. But we felt that 35mm films would start to become hard to get, and sure enough, that's what's happened. Very few features now are made available on 35mm.
I think the natural home, and arguably the only place for film, is in cinemas, being used for its original purpose. You know, it's not something that's I don't think it's something that's antiquated and is just something that should be looked at, you know, in a museum or whatever, as look how we used to do it, compared with this hard drive that now is how we watch the latest films.
But I suppose what digital does is for me anyway, allow us to show restored archive films in pristine condition. So, you know, as someone who over the years has sat through lots and lots of screenings of old celluloid films that are scratched and chopped to bits, it's a real revelation sometimes to be able to watch a fully restored digital archive film that is, you know, in pristine condition. So in terms of preserving cinema history and tradition, I think digital opens up whole new ways of doing that. So we're not having to sort of try and find a film print that might be in some obscure archive in Germany or something.
I think I am kind of in the minority of 35mm lovers, in the sense that I do think that the majority of people now don't care what is projected on. And I've seen some really lousy 35mm projection. I've also seen some really lousy DCP projection. So, you know, I think it definitely has a place. I think at the multiplexes, it's not really viable anymore. I do think in rep cinemas and kind of art house cinemas, it definitely needs to be preserved, because there's nothing quite like seeing something on 35mm. So I definitely think it's very much kind of part of preserving cinema's history to kind of keep it on 35mm. And 35 celluloid still remains the greatest kind of preservation medium for film. I mean, a lot of films aren't shot on film anymore.
But in terms of programming and how it's changed what you can do with the cinema, the digital revolution has been fantastic. So there was a point where you wouldn't think of having a film just for a wet Wednesday night in the middle of November. Now, because somebody can come with a DCP, you know, on a memory stick, and they can put it into your projector and you can show it on a wet Wednesday night in November. No costs involved, or very minimal costs involved in making a print or anything like that, or even transporting the print. It means that there is more variety, which means that people like Joan Parsons, who programs the showroom and all the other programmers, I'm sure, in the city, have a kind of a harder job because they've actually got much more to choose from.
What about the films that were never released on VHS? And there are hundreds of thousands of films that were released on VHS, millions potentially. That then, when you get that as your film canon, this is like, if you think of all the films that were ever released on VHS, that's like your film history, that all the films that technically exist anymore. So then you get DVD, and as you well know, there are lots and lots of films that were out on VHS that have never been released on DVD for whatever reason. So then you get DVD as your canon, and then you get Blu-ray as your canon, and as it goes along, you basically end up with like almost a handful of films that people remember as cinema, and thousands upon thousands that are lost. Now, that's what we need to preserve.
The wealth of film content available in different formats means that our options of where we watch films are now greater than ever. In order to accommodate this, cinemas have to diversify what they show. With the growth of live theatre, ballet, sport, and even TV shows being broadcast in cinemas now, our choice of what we watch is greater than ever. Alternative content now seems to be a very definite part of our cinemas, and is perhaps not just a reflection of the demand of audiences for more choice, but more a love of the whole experience of visiting a cinema.
Because the other side of the business now, on screen side of the business, is alternate content, live by satellite from the National Theatre, things like that, and that part of the business has grown and grown and grown. It is a fact that you cannot generally get into the National for most shows, and the fact they do stream live, and it is a strange feeling because you can hear the audience around you. The surround sound is really most weird, but it is a real growth industry, possibly too much, because you can actually show something from somewhere, probably 4 or 5 nights a week, which I suspect is too much. It'll kill it eventually if they carry on like that. And we are quite picky. We take the National Theatre because we know of the quality and we know we have an audience for it. We don't tend to take ballet, mainly because, believe it or not, we do ballet on our own stage. And although the guys in Tomorrow aren't the Bolshoi, they are actually remarkably good for the size of stage and the productions they run. So we don't tend to do that. But we're taking Globe on Screen at the moment, recordings from Shakespeare's Globe Theatre in London, and we're doing Showboat from San Francisco Opera this weekend. So that is a growing part of the business. Whether that will continue with the growth it's seen so far is hard to say.
I suppose the reason, or part of the reason that event cinema, alternative content, whatever you want to call it, has grown is changing technology. So I'm sure you're aware that cinema's changed from showing films on 35mm celluloid to being digital. So that allowed you to do lots more, be more flexible in what you do. And one of those things is to show live opera, ballet, theatre, and other types of events. So that's been a growing element of what we show in the cinema. Which is great. It means we appeal to an even broader range of people. So a lot of the people who come and see, say, the National Theatre Live productions, perhaps don't have the chance to go to London to see those productions, or maybe can't afford to go to London to see those productions. So we can present that to people in Sheffield. So I think that's an amazing way of extending reach for that type of activity.
I think the National Theatre programme, where they kind of show opera and theatre and stuff in cinemas, is just a great way of kind of catering to people who are either priced out of going to the West End or don't live near it.
I don't consider it cinema. I think that's the thing, because it's not. It's not film, and it's not what I would consider that. It's using the space of a cinema to alternative content is the right word. It's alternative to what you would normally get in a cinema, and I think it's to be applauded. I think these things are good and are popular and should be there, but not. It's not an either or. You know, the cinema should still be about cinema.
I think cinema needs to try and step away from being so reliant on films that are coming out, and one of the ways to do that is through alternative content, so concerts, sporting events, television. It would be good to keep making it more flexible, more accessible, more cost effective for people locally to maybe, we do things with groups who make their own films locally, and we'll screen them for their party for guests, so they can come in and see what they've made.
The live stuff, which is mainly live by satellite, is just another revenue stream. Not even a revenue stream. It brings in a different audience. The fact that people can come and see a Bolshoi ballet live from the Moscow Theatre on our screen, and be so close to the performers as if they were stood next to them on the stage, is wonderful. This is not something new to me, because I used to be head of technical for Picture House Cinemas, who, as you know, they've got cinemas all over the country. And as head of technical, I was involved from the very early days of doing live streams by satellite. So obviously, when we took our own cinemas, it was a natural thing to do it. So yeah, last night we did the Swan Lake, which is the Royal Ballet, live from the Royal Opera House. And I think there's roughly 120 people in here. For a Tuesday night in Barnsley, 120 people watching ballet. Fantastic, and they loved it. What I'm always amazed by is at the end, when the curtains drop in the Opera House and the local audience in the Royal Opera House are clapping, the audience here clap too, and you just think, yeah, we've achieved something there.
Through the growth of the internet, piracy, and the ever-expanding ways we can view films, the future of cinema looks like it might be in jeopardy. However, despite all these forces, the desire that drives us to cinema continues to manifest itself. The key questions, though, are still: can cinema continue to survive under ever-mounting pressures? And will our desire to continue to visit these venues ensure its future?
I do fear for the future, and could it be that in 5 to 10 years' time we won't be sat looking at a screen, we'll have headsets on, and part of this virtual reality of being there, will that be where we end up? Because let's face it, 25 years ago, the idea of streaming, or the idea of a mobile phone 25 years ago, was unheard of. The pace of technology is massive.
I think the multiplexes have definitely got a future. Albeit, they may need to look at the pricing structure. There's lots of people are complaining now about the cost of getting into these places. Customers in multiplexes tend to be treated like walking wallets. The staff, it's just get you in, see the film, get you out again. So you're not getting the customer service that some people like. If you like customer service, come to an independent cinema, whether it's this one, Penistone, Richmond, the Curzon chain, Picture House, are all geared more towards customers. I personally think that the best independent cinemas will survive, and I think the multiplexes will survive, provided they get the multiplexes need to tweak the pricing structure, and they need to slightly tweak their customer service.
Well, they kind of said it was going to die out when television came along. So, we watch and consume more now than we did in the early days. I think things will evolve, but I think, in the early days, cave people sat around and watched flickering flames on a wall and told stories in a collective environment. I think that's the key thing about cinema, is that you are with other people, and at the end of it all of the digital technology you want, all of the changes, you can't take away that human beings like collective experiences. Why do we still go to football rather than just watch it on TV? The coverage on TV is far better. You can tell what's happening with the ball, you can see the play far better, but we still go to football to watch this tiny little ball over there because of the collective experience. And I think, in a sense, cinema plays to that very human instinct that we all have to want to gather together and to see things.
So I think we're almost going back full circle where you at the beginning of cinema where people would throw buckets of water at you when the water came on the screen, you know, more interaction, more fluidity, and like you say, you know, going away from that stale period where wheel a load of people in, shut the door, put a film on, wheel them out again, and you don't see anyone in the interim.
And so the way I see cinema developing is there'll be more cinemas opening, maybe small cinemas, in smaller communities, maybe some cinemas in larger cities that are niche cinemas, maybe just showing documentary or just showing archive films. And so the way I see cinema developing is there'll be more cinemas opening, maybe small cinemas, in smaller communities, maybe some cinemas in larger cities that are niche cinemas, maybe just showing documentary or just showing archive films. So I see a diversification in the sort of cinema business. It doesn't feel like it's an industry that's dying to me. It feels like a very dynamic and buoyant one. But it's the same issues that, you know, there's lots of marketing and PA around large Hollywood releases. At the same time, you know, there are lots of small films from around the world that are opening in their own countries, and you know, if we can help to get some of those really good films shown in my city, in Sheffield, then you know, that's kind of the job I want to do.
Piracy is the biggest, by far the biggest problem, particularly for independent films, because you've got an audience, or a potential audience, or a generation even, who are used to like content for free and don't see the value in it, don't see that this is something that should be paid for. I don't know how you break that. I don't know how you educate people to go, this is actually something that costs a lot of money to make, and it almost sounds like patronising to say this costs a lot, so you really should pay for it. It's a tough market for sure. You know, you could put on the best films in the world, but without the adequate marketing, the adequate sort of just capturing people's imagination a little bit, I think it's hard. But then, you know, you see kind of old cinemas that have been long since closed down, or alternative, you know, other alternative spaces, different buildings being turned into like drive-ins, rooftop cinemas, sense of occasion, something different. That's what attracts people. You know, you can't just assume that I'm going to put this film on and everybody will turn up. You have to really, really shout for it and demonstrate why people should come.
George Lucas said something like, you know, you can see in 50 years' time, people will go to the cinema in the same way that they go to the opera. They'll go like once or twice a year. It will cost like $70. He's wrong about most things. And I think he's probably wrong about that as well.